Hello, and welcome to the Qualtrics Variables and Values training module. I am Paul Byrne, Research Data Services Librarian at Syracuse University Libraries. What we will cover in this module is question and variable numbering and naming, changing and labeling values, and previewing your results. Let's start with question and variable naming. By default, questions are numbered Q1, Q2, Q3, and so on. The columns or variables in your resulting data file will also be named in this manner. This question numbering scheme can and probably should be changed. This is because the question number or name will be used as a variable or column name when the data are exported. In particular, the question number can be changed to a name. This is especially useful if you have pre-written code with which to analyze your data. The resulting data file will already have the proper variable names, and you can just run your code. Otherwise, you will have to either edit your code to match your data, which is not recommended, or you will have to go back and change the variable names in your data anyhow. Question numbers or names by default are not shown on the survey. This of course can be changed, but if you have changed the number to a name, the respondent will see the name. Also, if you reorder the questions, the question numbers or names are not adjusted, so they will appear out of sequence. So if you really want the respondent to see a question number, you can always make it part of the question text. For these reasons, it's probably better not to let the respondent see the actual question numbers as they are in Qualtrics, and use a progress bar instead to let the respondent know how far along they are in your survey. Also, remember that instructional or descriptive text and images are treated as questions and are included as variables in the data. This is done so you can determine how long a respondent looked at the instructions, or to make sure that they actually did see it as they are supposed to. In these cases, it might be helpful to rename these consistently, like inst1, inst2, etc., to make them easy to find later on. Let's take a look at Qualtrics. Here we have three very basic questions in Qualtrics. As you can see, the default is to number the questions Q1, Q2, Q3, and so on for however many questions you have. You can change this default numbering scheme if you want. Just come over to Advanced Options, select Auto Number Questions. You have the default of sequential numbering, block numbering, which renumbers the questions within each block or section of your survey, and for internal ID numbering. Qualtrics has a specific ID for every single question, and you can use this instead. I don't know of too many instances where this would be more useful than the other options. You can also change the prefix. This prefix can have up to 4 characters. You cannot use an uppercase V. This is because Qualtrics adds some default variables to your data and uses the uppercase V as a prefix for those. You can use a lowercase v, though I don't recommend doing this, as programs such as SAS and SPSS do not use case-sensitive variable names, and this will get confused between the V1 that Qualtrics automatically puts in and the ones you put in yourself. Let's just stick with the default numbering scheme for now. One other thing to keep in mind is if you reorder the questions, it does not renumber them. So in your resulting data file, it will still be Q2, Q1, Q3, and so on, which can get to be very confusing. By default, the respondents will not see the question numbers, so this may not be a problem for your respondents, but it will be in your data file. You can, however, have Qualtrics automatically show the question numbers. Go up to Survey Options, and then click on Show Question Numbers, and save the changes. Let's preview the survey to see what this would look like. Now you can see where this could be confusing to your respondents. The numbers are out of order, and one thing you'll notice is that question 2 is not really a question. It is actually a text or graphic item. This will be included in the resulting data file as a column or variable, and will show a 1 if the respondent saw this instruction, depending on your skip patterns. Of course, since it is not really a question, you don't want to show the question number next to it. One very important option in Qualtrics is the ability to replace the question number for each individual question and the resulting variables in your data file with more descriptive names. This is particularly useful if you have pre-written code in SAS, SPSS, or something else to analyze your data. You will want the variables that come out of Qualtrics to have the same names as the variables in your code, so you can just run your code without having to edit it or having to change the variable names in SPSS or whatever else you are using. You can do this very simply by clicking on the question number, and you get a text box. The variable names can have up to 10 characters. Do not start it with a number or special character. You can use an underscore within the name. Remember, if you have Qualtrics automatically show the question numbers, then your respondent will see the new names, not the numbers. You can see how this will be very confusing to your respondents. So it would be better to not have Qualtrics show the question numbers at all. Let's turn that off. If you really want your respondents to see a question number, you can always make it part of the question text. But instead of, or in addition to question numbers, you might want to show them a progress bar. This lets them know how far along they are in your survey. To do this, just click on Look and Feel, and you can see the options for progress bar. You'll see the differences down at the bottom here. The default is none. With text, will show the percentages 0% and 100%. Without text, just shows the progress bar. And with verbose text, shows a phrase survey completion along with the percentages. Let's take a look. Much nicer, correct? Now let's talk about changing and labeling values. Just by way of definition, values are the numbers or text entered into the data file that you will analyze. Value labels are the descriptive text that software such as SPSS or Stata use to make their output easier to read. In Qualtrics, the value for each possible response is numbered from 1 to however many response options you have for a particular question. As you have suspected, The values and value labels can be changed. Let's take a look at Qualtrics again. To see what values and labels Qualtrics is using, click on the gear icon to the left of the question box and select Recode Values. In the Recode Values dialog, click the boxes for Recode Values and Variable Naming. Now, here's where Qualtrics is different from most data analysis software. What Qualtrics is calling variable naming, software like SPSS and Stata call value labeling, and SAS calls variable formats. In SAS, Stata, and SPSS, variable naming is just that. It's the name of the variable. Now you can see by default, Qualtrics numbers the options 1 through however many you have. This may not always be what you want, though. In this example, you might want I never drink coffee to be 0. Or if you're asking a question such as, what year were you born, you might want these to be the actual years. You can easily change the coding by typing in new variables over the old ones. Note that you can only use numbers here. Negative numbers are allowed as well. You can also change the label that Qualtrics will output with the data by typing new ones in the pink boxes. When you are done, just go ahead and click the Close button. We'll look at what effect this has on the data in a moment. Now that you've made some changes, let's preview your results. You can always check what your data will look like by generating and exporting some test responses. You can generate test responses in the View Results tab under Advanced Options. You should still pilot test your survey by allowing others, preferably potential respondents, to fill it out. Let's take a look at Qualtrics. Once you've made the changes you want, you can generate some dummy data just to see what the output will look like. First, click on the View Results tab at the top. Then, if you're not already at this page, click on the Responses button. To generate some test data, come all the way over here and click on Advanced Options. Then select Generate Test Responses. You'll likely want more than just 5 responses, so go ahead and increase it. You can click on the Options link to get more options to allow unanswered questions. Showing verbose output simply increases the amount of information in the report that Qualtrics does when generating the responses. We'll see this in a moment. Click on the Start Test button. Qualtrics will do its thing. This is the report where the verbose output will go. And then just click on the Close button. Now you can see your test responses down here at the bottom. You can click on any of the response IDs to see a report for that particular respondent. This page can be pretty useful, especially for pilot testing, as it will tell you how long each respondent spent answering the survey. Of course, this is just a test, so the data doesn't show anything here. To look at your data in SPSS or Excel, click on the Download Data button at the top. Here you have several choices. though the defaults are probably what you'll want in most cases. To download a CSV file, which is useful in just about any software, not just Excel or Access, just click on the link. Qualtrics will show you the progress, say that it's complete, and give you a download dialog. Click OK. It'll take a moment to load, and here's your data. You can see all the variables that Qualtrics puts in by default, as well as your variables with the names that you gave them. To download a file to use in SPSS, just click on the Download SPSS.sav file. Again, you'll get the progress bar. Export complete. Click OK. And here you see all your data, your variables. Now if we go to Variable View, you can see all the default variables, the ones that you put in, the variable labels, which of course by default are the question text. And here is where it's very useful for changing the values. Click here. You can get all the new value labels that we put in earlier. Close this up. We also highly recommend downloading the SPSS syntax file, though you can wait until your survey is complete to do this. This file can be useful if you find you need to make changes to the value labels later on, as well as providing good documentation for your data. One last note. Just because Qualtrics does not have options to download your data in Stata or SAS or any other software format, does not mean that you cannot use the data in those packages. Just about any software will read the .csv file, or better yet, SAS, Stata, and SPSS are pretty good about being able to read each other's file formats. If it comes down to it, you can also use a program like StatTransfer to convert the SPSS file to another format. StatTransfer is available in several computer clusters on the SU campus, as well as in Bird Library. So, in conclusion, changing the default question numbering or naming can make your resulting data file easier to process. Likewise, changing the default values and value labels can also make your data set easier to process. And finally, be sure to generate some test data and preview it to make sure your changes produced what you expected. Thank you. We welcome your comments and suggestions. Our contact information can be found on the web page.